Combs Up, Fridays 6 p.m., Sundays 6 p.m. Stay tuned.
One decision, one moment of fear changed the destiny of an entire nation. We stood at the edge of God's promise. And then we turned back. But why would anyone reject the land God Himself promised to give them? I am Joshua, son of Nun. We had witnessed miracles beyond imagination. God split the Red Sea. God defeated Pharaoh. God fed us from heaven. Yet somehow, it wasn't enough. The people began complaining. Why are we here? Why did we leave Egypt? Why is this journey so hard? And perhaps we should ask ourselves, how often do we complain while standing in the middle of God's blessings? The people began longing for Egypt. Think about that. The same Egypt where they were slaves, the same Egypt where they cried for deliverance. Now they wanted to return. Why? Because they remembered the food but forgot the chains. Isn't that how temptation works? Makes us remember what felt good and forget what nearly destroyed us. The Lord heard their complaints, and He answered. Not with silence, not with rejection, but with quailed up birds filled the camp in numbers beyond counting. The people gathered greedily. But here's the question: were they seeking God's provision or simply feeding their desires? There is a difference. Then another crisis emerged. Even Moses' own brother and sister questioned his leadership. Has God only spoken through Moses? Their words revealed something deeper. Jealousy. Pride. The desire for recognition. Have you ever wondered why pride is so dangerous? Because pride often disguises itself as righteousness. Finally came the moment we had waited for. Moses selected 12 spies, one from each tribe. For 40 days we explored the promised land, and what we found was astonishing. The land truly flowed with milk and honey. The harvest was abundant. The vineyards overflowed. Everything God promised was true. But then fear entered the story. 10 spies saw giants. 10 spies saw walls. 10 spies saw obstacles. Only Caleb and I saw God's promise. The question wasn't, are the giants big? The question was, is God bigger? And that question still matters today. The people believed fear. Not faith. They cried throughout the night. They talked about returning to Egypt. They accused God of bringing them there to die. Can you imagine? After every miracle, they still doubted Him. Fear convinced them that God's promise was impossible. Then came one of the saddest moments in Israel's history. God declared that the generation who refused to trust Him would not enter the promised land. 40 days of spying became 40 years of wandering. Why? Because unbelief always delays what faith could have received. The tragedy wasn't that God failed. The tragedy was that the people stopped trusting Him. Today, many believers stand exactly where Israel once stood. God calls us forward, but fear says stay where you are. God says trust me. Fear says what if I fail? God says I am with you. The story of Numbers 11-14 is not really about giants. It is about faith. It is about trusting God when His promises seem impossible. The people who entered Canaan were not those who had no fear. They were those who trusted God more than their fear. So let me ask you, what promise of God are you struggling to believe today? What giant is standing between you and your next step of faith? Remember this, your giants may be big, but your God is bigger.
News stories, Combs Up, Fridays 6 p.m., Sundays 6 p.m. Stay tuned.